In my mind, there's one choice for roofing around here, and I'd go with your best choice. Whether it's time to replace your roof or repair it, Best Choice Roofing provides top-notch roofing services tailored to meet the unique needs of Detroit homes and businesses. They serve the region and inside the city of Detroit, too. You can find out more at bestchoiceroofing.com/Detroit. That's bestchoiceroofing.com/Detroit, or call 313-474-7031. That's 313-474-7031. Hello and welcome to Your Daily Detroit. I am Jer Stays, and it is Friday, December 13th, 2024, and we are sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan on Your Daily Detroit. Joining me across the table at Tech Town is none other than Mr. Friday, Devin O'Reilly. How are you?
I'm cold, Jer. I'm really cold.
Is it so cold in the D?
It's really cold in the D today, but the sun is shining through the windows of Tech Town, warming my heart and my body.
Last night, there was a point where it really felt like whiteout conditions. The whole house was shaking with the wind. It was crazy.
Yeah, it got pretty rough. There was a lot of snow blowing around today. Hopefully everyone got to work safely if you were venturing out. But roads are pretty fine now. We're used to this in Michigan.
Yeah, if you have been around Michigan for a while, you would know that this is coming. Every December, January, February, you just kind of get ready for it. Get out the big coat. You know, there is part of me that's like, there isn't weather too cold, but there is dressing wrongly for the weather. Right? Like if you dress right, you can handle most anything.
I think so. Protecting your extremities are very important in a temperature like this.
100%. Well, today's episode, we're going to talk about a couple of things that are coming up as we are racing towards the holidays. Devin O'Reilly.
Yeah, it feels they are upon us. There's only a couple weeks of like we were just talking about like work left. I think a lot of our listeners probably are in the same boat where like after the end of next week, your work is probably shutting down. I mean, unless you work in service industry or something where you're going to continue to kind of work through the holidays. But most like kind of like office type jobs are just shutting down after next week.
Just so people know, we will go on an abbreviated schedule between Christmas and New Year's. I think we're going to do 2 or 3 episodes. We'll be a lot more scaled back. Devin O'Reilly, I think that we're going to catch up next week. I'm hoping to do our big end of year predictions episode.
That'll be a fun one
next week. Maybe we can get Norris Howard involved.
That always makes it fun. Well,
absolutely.
As long as you don't feel outnumbered.
I'm used to it now.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm used to being the minority party of the East Side.
Fair enough.
All right, let's get into a couple of stories. One is connected to a major local brand, but doesn't all happen here. Cruise shut down this week. That's the autonomous unit of General Motors. Well, they said they're shutting it down, pulling the funding. That takes some time to happen, absorbing some of the employees in. Some are going to lose their jobs. But I think this opens up a wider conversation about autonomous and self-driving vehicles. And Devin O'Reilly, for listeners who don't know, you've been around the mobility space for a while. And in fact, your job title for a while literally had the word mobility, which relates to all this stuff in it.
Yeah, that's the word we use for kind of everything, the movement of goods, people, services, mobility. That's kind of the term because automotive is just like such an outdated term for what's going on because, you know, how many people actually work in automotive?
So some might say, why are we talking about Cruise? It's dead. But
it's a big deal that it's dead.
It's a big deal that it's dead, and I think it would deserve some unpacking.
It's financially a big deal. It's kind of for the narrative, it's a big deal. I think that kind of like with electric vehicles, but this may even be larger in the sense that like we really got out over our skis with autonomous vehicles and what they were going to be able to do. You know, I would fully admit if you would have talked to Devin 5 years ago, 2019, let's say, I was getting fed a lot of very bullish takes on autonomous vehicles. And I would have probably told you that you're going to see autonomous vehicles by 2024, certainly 2025, we'd see kind of start to proliferate in the autonomous vehicles. There were people telling me they had young kids and they were like, these are people in the industry, by the way. My kid's not going to end up getting a driver's license because we're just going to be driving, you know, we'll have autonomous cars by the time they're 16. I think we were kind of feeding into a lot of our own. It was kind of a circle narrative where people were, you know, the industry was telling us what was going on, and then those people were feeding the general public. And it just got to the point where we thought it was right on the cusp, and we're now having to really pull back the reins as far as our expectations, and now companies are really pulling back the reins financially.
Cruise had some specific issues, especially after that tragic incident where that person was run over and dragged, and that was the catalyst, I think, for a true reset when it comes to General Motors and looking into the box of Cruise instead of it being a hands-off investment and saying, what's actually in here? What are the things that we've included and not included? And that I think, helped precipitate a whole waterfall of events that led to this situation. On top of that, I feel like General Motors is realizing what Ford did and what the public appetite really is. Now, in tech circles and online, people get really excited about self-driving cars. There's a lot of buzz about, things with Tesla and things like that. But consistently, I find that the general public is not as interested as a full product in self-driving cars. In fact, we ran a little social survey. Now, this is not scientific, but over with our social following, 56% of our listeners do not want a self-driving car. 12% maybe, 18% yes, but they're not ready yet, and only 13% say yes right now.
So there's a couple things with that. One, Cruise was really built around the Robotaxi kind of thing. So it was more like that was the investment, was that we were going to have these Robotaxi fleets. Think of the, what we really say Robotaxis, Ubers and Lyfts. That's what they were hoping for, doubling down on, is that you're going to be able to eliminate the driver aspect of Ubers and Lyfts, and it would just be all Robotaxis. Now, Waymo is really working on this and pretty much the head of the game. Waymo is kind of leading the pack on this technology.
You're even seeing Waymos now all across Metro Detroit. Listeners are telling me they're showing up all over town.
So I think, some of this is just kind of seeding the fact that, GM does a lot of things really well, but maybe autonomous robotaxis is something that Waymo does better. And, why spend $2 billion a year on something that you're just getting outdone in by a company like Waymo, who really, that's what they do. That's their only focus. So there's some of that seeding. And then, like you said, some of it is seeding to the general public that maybe there's not the appetite for autonomous vehicles that people at GM think. But what I want to get into, Jared, is more so like, I'm not the person to get into the nitty gritty numbers on, why financially this didn't make sense. But what I would like to talk about a little bit is the psychology around it, because I think that's important. People understanding what an autonomous vehicle is. When you talk about that survey, I just wonder what are people picturing?
Well, a lot of the DMs talk about, I don't want a self-driving car. I want working transit. I want a self-driving car for people who can't see or for people with disabilities. Like special cases, they look at a self-driving car as something that, and this is the whole, there's obviously people who are very pro self-driving cars in this, but the overwhelming response was, this is not something I'm actually interested in or see a lot of value. And a lot of what I want out of self-driving, I can already get in newer vehicle models. If you think about, I believe it's the Ford has the, Blue Cruise? Mm-hmm. That idea of driver assist, where you're on the freeway and it helps drive for you and things like that.
Heavy driver assist, and that's how the car companies are already still kind of like sneaking it's like, putting the vegetables underneath the mac and cheese or in the mac and cheese. Like they're still sneaking the autonomous vehicle technology into the cars we drive. They're just giving us the option if we want to turn it on or not. But they're getting the tech in there no matter what. But I wonder, because some people think like, oh, autonomous vehicles, I don't want something where there's no steering wheel and no gas pedal, and that is kind of scary. Now, the good news is something like that is so far from actually being a reality. But I will agree with anyone who thinks that a absolutely great application for autonomous vehicles is like a fixed route shuttle for transportation, for transit for public. I think that is a realistic and very worthy application for autonomous vehicles. A fixed route shuttle that goes to and from one place, or even in a loop, that's the type of thing where we do have the technology to put in closed loop autonomous vehicle shuttles. And I do hope we see those, because you're right, Jared, that is something for someone for people who maybe have disabilities or people who aren't able to drive. That is a worthy and good application. I hope we see that. Now, for the other stuff, here's what I want to tee up, is I do think that if you are a proponent of autonomous vehicles, whether you're in the industry or not in the industry, I think they need to make the better case for why this is a safety play. Not just a tech play. It's not tech just to have cool tech and I don't have to drive my car. Isn't that neat? That's not why people should be thinking about this. It's a safety play. Think about how much reduction we would have in vehicle crashes, deaths, if we have these connected cars that are talking to each other. That's why I really would like people to think about it, because you mentioned, Jer, Cruise can have one fatality and it just shakes the whole industry. And now it's, oh my God, we're, tenuous balance here. How many friggin' vehicle deaths happen in a given day from regular cars? And we just don't talk about it because we're just numb to the fact that these are dangerous machines driving all over the place all the time. And we've become numb to the deaths just kind of happen when autonomous vehicles are held to this impossible standard of, one fatality and, a million hours of road time, or I don't know what it actually is, but
there is a psychology to this where you can assign it as an act of God or an individual making a mistake versus the cold calculation of an algorithm. There feels like there can be a connection there, whereas if it's just the technology, it feels dystopian. Even though mathematically, most likely, it will be far safer.
Autonomous vehicles are safer, and I don't want to hear any BS otherwise, frankly. I don't care if you send me an article about one person who died in an autonomous vehicle or 10 people who died in an autonomous vehicle, because I will send you data on the thousands and hundreds of thousands of people who die in vehicle crashes. So like that's why I think it's just a change in the narrative, and I'm not even doing this as like a autonomous vehicle evangelist, but I do think they're getting a bad rap in the sense of like, I want safety in my vehicles. And I think about this as a father of a young child. You know, I mentioned the person who said, oh, my kid won't have to get their driver's license. That's not going to happen for my daughter, 12, 14, whatever years from now. That's not, she's going to have to get a driver's license, I think. But what I would like is for her to have an extremely safe vehicle that talks to other vehicles on the road, that does have some autonomy in it, in the sense that, it prevents mistakes from happening. It prevents reckless driving. Like, I'm absolutely for autonomous vehicles that do that.
And some of the technology that you're seeing being developed in Michigan is interesting around that, because it's about not just talking to other vehicles, but talking to the road and talking to the infrastructure. Doing it just optically, it's just not going to work. From the people that I talk to that are honest about it and not trying to like pitch their thing. What you need is the stop sign and the car able to talk. More than just the visual of it, where there can be a sensor and like, oh, I am X feet from this stop sign,
right,
or whatever thing. And that's some of the work that's being done on I-94 and other corridors of actual physical infrastructure. In order to get self-driving cars to really work, we're going to need to replace our infrastructure.
Absolutely. Again, autonomous vehicles, when you talk of the people who really know them best, it's not just about the singularity of this is an autonomous vehicle that's really smart. It's only as smart as all the other things that it's talking to, the other cars on the road that it's talking to, the other infrastructures, traffic lights, stop signs, other obstructions. Like, a car is only as smart as what else is talking to. So what the people who are really on the forefront of this are trying to build out is just a smart infrastructure for our cities, towns, municipalities, so that everything talks to each other. And that, in essence, makes it a lot safer, because at the end of the day, it does become this social debate. I almost liken it, Jer, sometimes to like the gun control debate too, of people who just want to have things just so they can do them, where it's like, I want to go 120 miles an hour on a 50 mile an hour road, and I don't care if you want to stop me. Well, I do want to stop you. I don't think you should be able to go 120 miles an hour, and I think your car should stop you. If you are careening towards a school bus, your car should, stop. It should just, these type of safety measures, it's like people want to do reckless, stupid, and dangerous things in their cars, and I'm not sure we should be allowing that.
Do you feel like your opinion on that has shifted over the years, especially now that you're a parent?
I think so. I think it's certainly shifted a little bit. I don't think I would have been completely on the other side of it. Again, I'm not some like car guy, but like also I'd like to hear the counter argument for I want to live as dangerously as possible in my car and endanger other people's lives. Like, no, I don't think you get that right. To me, that's the psychology of the autonomous vehicle argument, is the goal is to make things safer, not to put intrusive technology. And, I think we need to rethink how dangerous driving is, and if there are technologies to make it safer, I think we need to implement them, and the people who want to be absolutely reckless and dangerous, be damned. I'm sorry.
I think long term this is going to have impacts on the industry, because there were a lot of like financial projections and giant bets made and lots of money spent, but we're going to end up with vehicles that are largely similar to what we have now.
A lot of money was wasted, but I guess in the good news, and the stuff I read about GM also points out that it's going to be cost saving. So at the end of the day, they're probably going to save some money, not just dumping money down the proverbial toilet into these AV vehicle fleets. They'll actually save some money, and it's probably good for their bottom line.
If you've got feedback, dailydetroit@gmail.com. All right, time is ticking also on one of your babies, if you will, your professional passions that you have. The Detroit Policy Conference is coming up next month, and I'm not sure when we'll have time in the schedule to talk about it, so let's talk about it now.
Mine as well. Let's get it out there, because the registration is open, has been open. You can come to this event. It's certainly not as cost prohibitive as like the Mackinac Policy Conference, for instance. It's a full day of really interesting programming, and kind of apropos of what we were just talking about, the theme of this year's conference is driving the innovation economy. And the discussions, the speakers, the conversations we're going to have are all going to really center around how we in Detroit and the region can ensure that we are driving an economy of innovation, innovative ideas, innovative companies through all sorts of different lenses.
So when you think about who should be paying attention to this conference and going, and we will, of course, be talking about it on Daily Detroit. We'll be having people there.
You'll be there.
Yep, definitely, to kind of keep people up to date on the big news that comes out of there. But when you think about who should attend this, who should that be?
I'm going to be really simple here. Our listeners. If you're listening to this podcast, you're interested in what Daily Detroit talks about on a weekly basis and your episodes and, even ones that I'm not on, you are definitely someone who needs to listen to this because it is a very deep but broad range of topics and discussions. So we're going to have a panel with university presidents, President Ono, President Guskowitz from Michigan State, and President Espy from Wayne State University. We're going to talk about innovation from the higher education standpoint. And all three of those universities are making multi-million-dollar and billion-dollar bets in Detroit. And that's really interesting. We're going to hear from the private sector, Kofi Bonner of Bedrock, Bob Riney of Henry Ford Health, also billion-dollar bets on the future of Detroit and doubling down here. We're going to hear from the startups themselves, companies like Airspace Link, Just Air, and Darren Riley. Johnny and Alexa from Black Tech Saturdays are going to speak about innovation and equity in innovation. So we're going to have some really, really interesting speakers. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that our current mayor in Detroit, Mike Duggan, is going to be kind of the finale of the conference, and God knows he always has interesting stuff to say as we've discussed before. But this year in particular, I think is going to be really interesting
for sure. Your keynote, I noticed a name that some people around city things and urban things will know, Richard Florida.
Yeah, Richard Florida has been, he worked with the chamber a lot in different entities around here. He's an urbanist. He's really a proponent of kind of the creative class, driving innovation and driving economic development. He's going to kind of set the stage for what the innovation economy is. So I think we can throw around the term innovation economy. Richard's going to do a good job at the top end of the conference of kind of explaining what the innovation economy is, why it's important, why we need to invest in it, and set the stage for kind of what's going to be talked about for the rest of the day.
I think another key thing in this is, yes, there are the conference tracks, but also the networking. I end up finding so many people that we end up talking to on the show or something else in that context, right? In that all these people, I don't know how many people attend it. It's a full house.
About 900 to 1,000.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? Yeah.
And it's great. It's at the Soundboard at Motor City Casino, which is super theatrical. So you get that's where they musical acts play and stuff. It's very theatrical. It feels important. It's a really cool atmosphere. It's not just your normal convention hall type of programming. So it's really interesting. This is the 11th year I'm doing this conference, so I'm super excited for it.
Yeah, and I mentioned it was kind of your baby because it's something that you're actually very involved in.
I'm involved in creating the agenda, and I have been for 11 years now. It's something that kind of brings together all the stuff I talk about in my professional life, my personal life. It brings it all together. This is kind of a microcosm of what I do at the conference.
Well, people can find out more about that at DetroitChamber.com. They've got a thing right there on the website. You can just click it, go to it, sign up if you want to go. And I know that I'll be there along with some people from the Daily Detroit team.
I'll be there, obviously.
Yeah.
Running around, ferrying speakers to and from backstage and all the fun stuff.
For sure. So check out the agenda if that is something that interests you. I know that I am interested in it. And there's always some bit of news that comes out of it.
Oh, yes. I was going to say, Duggan is almost certainly bound to make news. But, you think about Kofi Bonner and Bob Riney, is a good example. Or Santa Ono and the U of M project. The stuff that you and I talk about all the time. Like, we're going to talk to the people who are doing that. I can't imagine that they won't say some really, really newsworthy things around those massive projects.
Well, with that, we are done for today and the week on your Daily Detroit. Thank you so much to our members, patreon.com/Daily Detroit. Local media requires local support to survive. I'm very serious about this. It's the members that help keep us going through. And if you do want to sponsor what we're doing, whether it is the podcast or the newsletter, of course, you can always send me a note, dailydetroit@gmail.com as well. With that, I'm Jer Stays.
I'm Devin O'Reilly.
Remember that you are somebody, and we will talk next week.